Are you ready to make another batch of fast and fun Christmas ornaments? And one of the best things about the ones we're doing today is the technique is super versatile and you can use it to make not only Christmas ornaments like this, but coasters or mug rugs like this, and even coasters and matching hot pads like this. I'll walk you through every step of this classic beginner-friendly project so you can make lovely, giftable items to keep or to share. These are fantastic scrap busters. I used leftover 5-inch charm squares, cut up 10-inch layer cakes, and also fabric scraps left over from some of my other Christmas projects. And just like in my previous video, no hand sewing is needed for any of these projects, and the machine sewing is very straightforward. The one thing I do want to give you a heads up about is these do get pretty thick. Now, the ornaments and the coasters aren't too bad, but if you make a hot pad with the extra layers for that, it does get very thick. So you want to make sure that your machine is going to be okay with that. If you have a walking foot or a dual feed system, I would definitely use it. Let's talk specific sizes of the fabrics you will need. For a hot pad, 10-inch squares or leftover layer cakes work great. For mug rugs or coasters, I like to use 5-inch squares, which is the same as a charm square. And then for ornaments, I like them to be a little bit smaller. It's a better fit for our tree. So I like to cut these 4.5 inches. But when it comes to your project, you can use any size square you want. The only thing you'll need to keep in mind is to make sure that they're all the same size. And I'll explain what I mean. For each finished item, we'll need 1 square for the backing, and that's the fabric that you see on the back side. We'll need 1 square for the base. That's the fabric you'll see in the center. And then we'll need 2 squares each of 2 colors for the side pieces. Now you could use 4 different fabrics instead of 2 if you prefer. But all of these are going to be cut the same size. So all of these are 5 inches because I'm making a coaster. You will also need a piece of batting. Now I'm still using some of that leftover thermolam from when I made my design boards, but you can also use anything that is soft and low loft. You want it nice and thin like that. You don't want to use thick, slippery polyester batting because that's going to make it really challenging once we get all those layers. It's going to be too slippery, but you can use 80-20 batting. It's 80% cotton, 20% polyester. That works well. You can also use 100% cotton batting. If you're making a hot pad like this, you might want to use a layer of Insulbrite inside, especially if you're planning on pulling hot items out of the oven. But I'm not planning to do that. I'm not planning to handle any hot pans. I just want to be able to put this on the table and put a hot dish on top. So I used 2 layers of cotton batting. So you can see it's quite thick, but it's going to be good insulation for my table. The next step is to take our 4 side pieces. I have 2 of each color, and we're going to press them in half to make a half square triangle. And now just a reminder, I have something underneath this wool mat to protect my table, all right? And I find the easiest way to do that is pretty side out, match that point, and then just pull straight down. And that should give you a nice triangle. And then I'm going to press with the grain. So there's one, and we'll do the next one, just like that. You want to be careful that you don't distort them or cause them to curve. Okay, it'll take a minute. Make sure this is right side out. And no steam for this. You want just a nice dry iron. If you need to, you can use a little bit of starch or best press to give it a little more body. I am not using either of those. There we go. And now we're ready to assemble. We're going to start with the fabric that is going to appear in the center. That goes on the bottom, face down. All right, so we've got that face down, and then we'll take our batting layer, whatever you're using for your batting, and this layer, I like to cut 1/4 inch smaller than my squares. So for the pot holder, I would cut it 9 3/4 inch. For the coasters, I'm cutting it 4 3/4 inch. It's just 1/4 inch smaller. For the ornaments, I would cut it 4 1/4. And that lets me put this down. And you can still see about 1/8 of an inch of fabric all the way around. This will slightly reduce the bulk in the seam, but it's still big enough to allow the stitching to catch the batting and hold it in place. So that's why we did that. So the next piece is the piece that's going to be on the back. And that one goes right side up. All right, just like that. Get my little design board over here. Now we're going to put our side pieces on. And I like to start with this corner. And you want to match the corner. Line it up as carefully as you can. And then the next piece goes on like this. Okay. And then the next one like this. And so if you're using 2 sets of 2, you always want the same fabric lined up with each other. And then we're going to put this one on. And again, you can see the same fabric is meeting. Now at this point, I'm going to clamp my hand down and I'm going to flip this up so that can tuck underneath. So there we go. It looks like an hourglass block. All right. And the edges should be lined up pretty well. If you have a little sliver here and there that peeks out, that's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. And then I like to take my clips and clip at the corner. Now you can pin these if you'd rather. You can put more clips. If you want to clip the middles, you can. I usually just clip the points. I want to make sure those points are lined up. Can you see how that's going to be lined up? Want that lined up. So I like to pin from the top, and then I turn it over, and you see what's happening? So I'm just going to release the clip and put that bottom fabric so that it's nice and smooth and flat. Just like that. So there it is from the back, and here it is from the front. Now we're ready to sew. And we're going to sew it with 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay? And I'm going to grab one that's already sewn. It's like a cooking show. We've got it in stages. And you can see that I've just sewn all the way around. 2 things I want you to notice, that because we have this nice hourglass, you're actually going to be turning right on that line or really close to the line between the fabrics. Okay, that's going to be your turning line. So just keep your seam allowance consistent. I use 1/4 inch. It won't hurt if you go a little bit wider or narrower. Just be consistent and use the lines here, the fold lines, as your turning guides. The other thing I want to suggest is don't just go around once, go around at least twice so that it's going to be extra secure, because we are going to be putting a lot of stress on those stitches. Now, we just need to get rid of some of this bulk in the corner. And you could just cut straight across like this, but I like to take a little bit more out of the seam. And watch your fingers by taking a cut like this and then a cut like this. And you can use scissors if you want to, but do you see how much more fabric that removes? Just make sure to stay at least 3 or so threads away from your stitching line so that you don't accidentally cut into it. Okay, let's just trim this out. And the next step is where the magic really happens. If you've never seen it before, you're going to get your mind blown. And if you have seen it, it'll be a good reminder of how cool it is. All right, so we are going to take this. Now we got rid of that extra bulk, and we're going to turn it. All right, so we're just going to reach inside and turn it just like this. And if you still have triangle, keep going till all you can see is the backing fabric. Okay, now at this point, it's starting to come together. And I find it helpful to reach in there with a chopstick. You want something that's sharp-ish, but not too sharp. You don't want to go sailing right through the corner. And poke that out. Just get that nice and poked out. Okay. And I also like to use either a chopstick or something like this. This is a fancy hero marker, but I like that I can reach in and just put a little pressure on that seam to make sure that there's no pleats on the side. Remember that magic I promised you? We're about to get there. Right? We're back with a hot, dry iron. And here is our little piece. And I'm going to reach in. And I'm using my thumb to catch it all the way down here. And I'm going to reach in and just roll that and give it a little press. Okay. Then I'm going to reach in and do the next one, kind of all the way down at the bottom. And you want to try to make the widths of the folded bit about the same for each one. You know, it's not the end of the world if it's a little different, but make them as consistent as you can. All right, just like that. Okay. Almost done. Just like that. Okay. Isn't that looking cool? It really makes it look much more complicated than it is. Now, you can put a few pins in here to keep those down so you can sew them. I like to use either a fabric glue stick or a little bit of my Roxanne's glue based in my Easy Squeezy bottle. And it only takes just a wee little bit. You don't want to saturate the fabric so that it gets soggy and stiff. All right, and then we'll just press that back down first with our fingers. Okay, just like that. And then we're going to come in with our hot dry iron. And I got 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4. Okay, that will just dry the glue out and set it so that it won't be sticky when we sew through it. We're just about done. Hang in there, and I'll show you how I sew these. Here's the one that we just pressed and used the glue just to hold that down so that we can sew it. And you have options. Now, I often use a very small zigzag stitch and stitch it down like that. And the stitching goes through all the layers, which is why you definitely want to use a walking foot if you have one. All right, but this is going to hold everything together and give it nice dimension. And I recommend when you stitch these, start here and stitch toward the point. Start here, stitch towards the point, and so on. Don't try to start stitching on the outside. That's a lot more frustrating. Here we go on this one. Again, I'm starting here, stitching to the point, here to the point. Now your top thread, when I'm batch sewing, I just use monofilament thread or something that's going to blend with everything. But if you're using it for a hot pad, something that will take heat, I would stick with cotton thread because cotton is going to be more heat resistant than polyester. And then on the back, you want to use a thread that blends with your backing fabric. Now, if you don't want to do a zigzag, a straight stitch works just fine. And so for this one, I don't know if you can see it, but it's a straight stitch right next to that fold. And again, I started here, stitch to the corner, here, stitch to the corner, all the way around. And then this one has white on the back, so you can actually see that's what that quilted design looks like. All right, so it looks really cute, front and back, holds everything together, and gives it nice dimension. Isn't that fun? So the last thing is, if you're making ornaments, to put a hanging loop. And these can be as fancy or simple as you like. Connor and I often use gold cord or a soft cord, or in this case, a thin ribbon. And the key, whichever of those you're using, is to use a needle with a large eye. And so this is either a tapestry needle or a yarn darner or something like that. I shared my trick for threading thick cords and things through the eye of a needle like this in the previous ornament video. And I also shared it in a short clip. So if you're looking for some help with that, that is there. But here they are. And Connor actually strung these, and I think she used 7 inches of ribbon. Works just fine. They're ready to hang on the tree. This is one of my favorite beginner-friendly projects because it's fast, it's versatile, and it's fun. You can make up a batch of ornaments for your tree, sew coasters as hostess gifts, or create hot pads for everyday use. The possibilities are endless. If you enjoy projects like this and you want to hear about new tutorials, tips, and occasional freebies, make sure you're on my email list. It's where I share what's coming up next and lots of encouragement for your quilting journey. Happy quilting!